Hello, my name is Jennifer Haas. I am a graduating senior in the political science department at Kutztown University. I am also in the honors program at Kutztown. I have been working on this research. We have titled it District Heterogeneity, Affluence, and House Member Spending Priorities for about 2 years now. I first started exploring the issue of representation in my POL 101 class with Dr. Lem, social science research and design. And I was determined to make a case for congressional term limits. That's how we started. And as I explored research and articles, I came across the Supreme Court ruling that from 1995 that outlawed congressional term limits, and that put an end to that. As well as additional reading, I learned that it is not something as a political scientist that we would really get behind for a multitude of reasons. And also my interest in history engaged me in the Constitution and what the framers had in mind. And so we decided for this honors thesis that we would go ahead and combine a historical perspective with an empirical analysis of what is good representation, what is good governance. And we know that representatives have limited resources. So what are they, or how are they allocating or prioritizing those resources? So we started with the historical evolution, and you have the age-old fight between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and what it means to be a representative and what it means to represent a constituency. It was never, there was a concept, but it was never clear, and there was never an agreement about what the House was actually supposed to do. And you have Madison on the side of it should be a trusteeship, and we had a natural aristocracy and a political elite. And then you had on the other side the anti-federalists who believed that a representative should be a member of the people that they're there to serve. If we're electing them, then we should know who they are. As we move on through the founding of the country, we get into the mid-1840s, and we see the solidification of two-party politics, and we see the first federal mandate for single-member districts. Prior to 1842, the states were allowed to make their own rules as to how they were going to organize, how they elected their members, and the federal government kind of stepped in 1842 and said, nope, you're going to make districts in your state. And then, we enter into the Civil War, where we see Reconstruction going on, and we see that massive expansion of the franchise with the freed slaves. And, we're also experiencing population growth with immigration into the country, and, expansion into territories and things of that nature. And it becomes important to understand what a representative is going to do, what he represents, and especially in the issue with the freed slaves, they had no representation, and they were fighting for representation. And unfortunately, when Reconstruction ended, we see a lot of those gains kind of get peeled back. And for decades, actually almost a century, we see a class of people that is severely underrepresented in our government. And then, another issue is, we get into the Great Depression, and where Congress really drops the ball and neglects to redistrict in 1920. And so there's a period between 1910 and 1930 where we have stayed congressional districts, and the resulting legislation set the number of seats in the House of Representatives at 435. Then into the 1960s and 70s, the Supreme Court gets involved when we're dealing with, and we have the one person, one vote. And there's a couple of very important cases that came out of that era that deal with district size and the boundaries and what districts can and can't do. And it really is trying to move forward to that one person, one vote, and making representation really fair and equitable for all people involved. We start looking at the existing literature within representation, which is vast. So you really have to whittle it down in what you're kind of looking at. In any kind of representation literature, you really need to start with Richard Fenno, where he really makes the case that representatives, have multiple priorities or multiple issues that they need to deal with, and their perception of their district drives their strategy. However, they're forced to make trade-offs. And then, you get into some of the more modern representations literature, and that's where, I'm building on kind of Jeffrey Hardin and Bernhard, Sewell, and Solkin, where we're going to be looking at legislative styles as well as dimensions of representation, with maybe a small focus of sub-constituencies that may influence a larger district. So we were able to take all of this existing literature and whittle it down to, a burning question. We're looking at economics. So we saw that, research it has shown that representatives will pursue short-term solutions over such as constituency service and allocation projects over a longer-term solution as policymaking in economically depressed areas. So with the help of Dr. Lem, we created a regression model, and we're testing the effects of district composition on representational priorities. So our dependent variable is going to be the amount that the representative spends on policy analysts or policy type staff positions. And we find that from the 2017 Members Representational Allowance, which is a public document that the government puts out, and we can see every entry as each staff position in that representational allowance and how much they spend on that. So we can look at the number of people as well as the salaries. And so what we're doing in this analysis is we're going to measure the we are measuring the representatives' priorities by determining what percentage of their budget is spent on policy-related activities. And we took that information where I coded the representational allowance data with policy analyst titles as a 1, and then you have constituency service type of titles, caseworkers, constituent servants, things like that, as a 2, and then you had some other categories. So we just kind of put that as a 0 there. And then we added layer on that of unemployment, where right now how we're calculating our unemployment is total employment divided by the total population. And we know that that needs to be finessed. And then the second major variable is the median household income. So we're expecting to see districts that have higher median household incomes, their representatives are spending greater amounts on policy analysts and focusing more on policy initiatives as opposed to servicing their local constituents or going after allocation projects or bringing home the pork, if you will, which limit the amount of the constituency that they can reach. And then we kind of threw just like a little third layer on there to see if a party status had anything to do with how they prioritized, whether or not they were Republican. So our results right now, they're just preliminary, and we're going to be refining these moving forward because we need to, as you can see, the number of observations, we only have 254, and we're looking at 435 as the number of the House members. And you can see from the graphs here that we're currently showing no statistical significance in our data. So as we move forward with this project, we're going to review my coding procedures and refine that, as well as clean up the data to see if we can see any trends in the data. The goal is to be able to develop this paper. My hope is to return to Kutztown for my master's degree in public administration, and Dr. Lem and I will continue to work on this and hopefully get it out for publication and possibly present at a larger political science conference. Thank you very much for listening to my research, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about representation and what we are looking at for our representation, or what our representatives are prioritizing based on where we live. Thank you.